For more on this, I'm joined live by Stephen Kyle from Ithaca in New York. He's an associate professor from the S.C. Johnson College of Business at Cornell University. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So what's your take on how Trump's base and supporters view the actions that he's taken so far on the economy and on trade?
Well, from a symbolic point of view, certainly many of them are quite happy about it. Mr. Trump campaigned on an anti-immigrant platform and on putting tariffs in place to get rid of foreign competition, and he's certainly done that. But from the point of view of an $18 trillion economy, $50 billion or even $100 billion worth of tariffs really aren't going to make a big difference, except to those who are directly affected, and they certainly will notice it.
Now, how successful do you think the White House has been in redirecting the conversation back to his economic wins with today's tax event, especially in light of these other domestic issues and trade spats?
Well, I don't think it's been all that successful. I just watched the evening news here a few minutes ago, and most of it was focused on the more salacious rumors about his various affairs and political problems and legal problems, and not on the tax bill or even on the tariffs, which actually have been in the news lately.
Now, let's look at the tax cuts, since that's what he's on the road promoting right now. In terms of the impact, how have they fared so far, and who have been the biggest winners and losers?
Well, the top rate went down from 39.6% to 37%. That doesn't sound like a big change, and in the grand scheme of things, perhaps it isn't. Certainly not enough to change people's behavior drastically, but it ends up being a big number when you count up the cumulative debt that it results in over a 10-year or 20-year horizon. So it does seem to me, and most other economists, that this is not something that's going to remain as it currently is. We are going to have to do something about this over the next few years.
So help us understand this, because there are Trump supporters who rally behind his message, but not necessarily the economic impact when it comes to their businesses, especially if these tit-for-tat trade tariffs with China go into effect. So what's the thinking behind supporting the trade policies if they know that it might end up hurting their livelihoods or their businesses?
Well, there is a difference between what Mr. Trump campaigned on and the Republican Party, which rules in Congress. The Republican Party has never been in favor of tariffs. They've always been a free trade party, promoting trade pacts and more trade with all of the partners that we can. But what they have done in the tax bill that was recently passed was essentially complete the Republican wish list of reducing taxes on corporations and on higher income individuals, because most of the lower income individuals don't really pay enough taxes to make that big of a difference. From the point of view of growth, it is hard to imagine that a stimulus of this kind is going to make a huge difference when we are at or near the peak of the business cycle. So I think it remains to be seen what difference that could possibly make.
Now, speaking of the tariffs, we know that China's proposed retaliatory tariffs impact people in states with industries that mainly voted for Trump. So how aware are those people about how that could impact their everyday lives?
Some of them are extremely aware. Just to take one example, I was out in Wisconsin last weekend, which is a major producer of ginseng, most of which gets exported to China. Some of the retaliatory measures are aimed right at them, and as we all remember, Wisconsin was one of those states which, on a razor-thin margin, went for Trump in the last election. Those farmers who produce that ginseng and who historically have sold it to China for many years are not happy, and they know who to blame for their problems.
Now, this is especially important in this midterm election year. So if people do connect the dots, I mean, the White House is saying that there's going to be short-term pain businesses, but they'll be benefiting in the long term. What are your thoughts on how this is going to play out?
Well, I think in the short run, there are concentrated losers and winners. Certainly, anybody who produces steel, just to take an example, is going to be happy. Anybody for whom steel is an input is going to be sad. Over the longer term, it worries me because the retaliatory measures can build up. But more important, what this does is change our focus away from lowering costs and becoming more competitive through investing in our economy and actually becoming a higher cost producer because of the tariffs on the various inputs that our producers use. More than that, If I were a corporation and looking for a place to site my new manufacturing facility, I would tend not to pick the country that is trying to pick a trade war with the other big economies in the world. I would rather locate my production facilities where there's no chance of a trade war. Nobody's going to put a new tariff on my inputs. Nobody's going to slap regulations on me. So from that point of view, it worries me over the long run.
Certainly no one likes uncertainty. Thank you so much. Associate Professor Stephen Kyle from Cornell University.